Hi folks. So I've been really busy on the bike last sort of 36 hours. I've been doing absolutely tons of stuff. Basically, anyone that's seen my previous video will know that I've now given up on the old loom and I'm now working on making my own loom. So I've just been battering away, just basically creating circuits, doing wiring just as quick as I can. To be honest, it is pretty hard work, I'll be honest. You know, you've got to kind of study the diagrams and the Haynes manual, and then I've been drawing out my own wiring diagrams, and then you've got to cut the wire, strip it, put the ends on. You maybe got to make like Y or X pieces where you've got wires that join 3 or 4 different components or whatever. So and obviously you make mistakes sometimes, and then you have to nip the end off and start again or whatever, you know. So it's been pretty hard work, but I'm making some real progress. So what have I done? Well, that's the diagram for the headlights and tail lights. I've not actually done them yet. I've still to do those. I've done the diagram, but I've not done the work. The indicators I've done, but I didn't do a diagram for that. I just kind of got on with it because I had a pretty good idea of, you know, what to wire, what I had to wire where, kind of thing. So starter circuit I did yesterday, and I'd already made a video about that, so don't really need to go into that too much. Suffice to say, the bike does actually, well, I say start, I mean it doesn't start. I haven't actually fired it up yet because obviously there's no petrol tank or anything on it, but the engine turns over on the starter button. But if you want to see that, watch my video from yesterday, or was it the day before, I can't remember, of it turning over. So that's the starting. Charging circuit, I did that yesterday afternoon, I think it was, after I'd done the starter circuit. So that's a pretty straightforward one, that one. You basically got the alternator, got 3 yellow wires from the alternator that go into the regulator, and then the regulator's earthed, and then there's a wire from the regulator that goes to the starter relay. You can see that there, that's the regulator there, and there's 3 black wires there. That's the wires from the alternator, and then that's the wire that goes to the earth, that other black wire there. I only bought like 3 colours of wiring, black, red and green, so it's that 3 colours. That's what I'm working with pretty much. So that thick black wire that goes to the front, and that's earthed there. So that's the charging circuit. Now obviously there's no way to know whether the charging system is working until I actually run the bike. You know, there isn't really a way I can test it, or I can't think of any way that I can test it. So, but it's a brand new regulator, new wire, and I've wired it all up quite carefully. So I'm reasonably confident the charging system should work okay. What else have I done? I've done the fan, the radiator fan circuit. I just need to put the switch in. I've done the earth part of it, and I've done the fuse to the ignition barrel, and that wire there, it's just those wires need to be put into the switch. Excuse me. Also done the fuel pump. I wasn't sure how I was going to do the fuel pump. Excuse me. I thought I would just maybe wire the fuel pump straight in to the ignition barrel. That's the main fuse ignition barrel on the diagram there, and that's what I did. And then what happened was, when I turned the key this morning, the fuel pump made a kind of loud rattling sound, and I quickly turned the key off because I thought it's probably not a good idea to run the pump when there's no fuel in it. And then at that point I realised why you have to have the fuel cut-off relay. CFCOR, fuel cut-off relay, that's the acronym I've used for that. So now what I'm doing is I'm wiring the fuel pump through the fuel cut-off relay, and the fuel cut-off relay is connected into the ignition, into the CDI, and it's also connected into the main fuse excuse me, and the ignition barrel. So that there you can see is that's the fuel pump. That's the fuel pump's like built-in cable which has a block connector, which is there, which has got one of its cables in. That cable is that's the earth cable. That's going to get wired into the front. When I do this, I've still got to earth everything. Everything's got to be earthed. I'm just going to do like a big ring thing and just like wire everything in. All the earth cables are going to go into the same earth, more or less. I mean, I've got another earth there, and there's an earth there as well, but most of it's going into the same earth. That's how they do it on a standard bike, so I don't see why I shouldn't do that with my wiring. Excuse me. So that's the block connector for the fuel pump there. So yeah, so the other wire from the wait a second. Okay. Oh yeah, so that wire was originally plugged into there at the point that I turned the key and it made the sound. So that little male spade connector went into the block connector for the pump. So what that's going to do now is I'm going to take that up and I'm going to put it in the. I'm going to have to put a female end on there because these are male ends, and this is the fuel cut-off relay. Okay, it's got 4 terminals on it. Male pin terminals. Need female ends crimped onto the wires. So the red wire and the green wire, these are wired into the coils. I'm kind of getting into the ignition system. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So that's wired into the ignition. This then is going to get wired into the appropriate terminal here. This comes from from the main fuse, which is there basically. So that the juice basically comes from the ignition barrel, the battery, ultimately through the starter relay, through the main fuse, through the ignition barrel, or through the ignition barrel, through the main fuse, then down this cable, then into the fuel cut-off relay. The fuel cut-off relay is controlled by the ignition, and it then operates. I'm going to have another wire here, which is going to go back to the fuel pump. So then when the engine starts, or when you're trying to start the engine, when you press the starter button, the engine turns over and the fuel pump then activates. So basically what it does is that what the fuel cut-off relay does is it basically syncs the fuel pump with the ignition, so that your fuel pump is only going when your ignition's going, because obviously you only want fuel to get pumped into the carburetors when you're trying to start the bike or when the bike's running. So I think that's the idea of that. So there we go. So that's that circuit. Obviously it's not complete, but I'm kind of getting there with that. So what else? The main thing I've been doing today, well actually, this afternoon I've been working on the ignition. Actually, before I talk about the ignition, I'm going to talk about the indicators. So the indicators I've wired them in. Put spade connectors on them last night. I've got like orange wires here. The green wire, that's the earth from the indicators. So what I've done is I put the wires from the rear indicators in with the tail light, the earth, and then just run a single green wire all the way to the front of the bike. And it's basically it's part of that bunch of green wires that you can see there. And then what we've got is the left hand side of the bike, the near side, has got a red cable, thin red cable. Again, that goes all the way to the front. And then try to see where it even is now. Well, it's down in there somewhere. It's still got to get wired into the switch, but anyway. And then the same idea with the black cable. So we've got a black cable, and then that goes to the front of the bike as well. And then what you got is you got these. Alright, here we go. This is them here, right? So that's, see the red cables. That's what I've done is I've put the front left and the rear left indicators together in the same spade connector using red wire so that you know that that's the left, and then we've got hang on a second, that doesn't look quite right. I think I've got the wrong thing there. Get all these wires mixed up. Would have been easier if I'd had more colours of wire, but never mind. So that one there, that's the front right and the rear right, which are both crimped into the same connector, and those will get plugged into these switch blocks. But what I discovered is that those wires of course go into this switch. Now basically I've managed to deduce that this switch doesn't work, okay, because what I did was I wired all my indicators up, plugged them into the end of that, into the block connectors for this switch, okay, powered on with the ignition turned on, tried the indicators, nothing happened, okay, nothing at all. So I checked all my wiring and I found that my wiring was okay. So I had a funny feeling, because this is a second-hand switch, right, that I got off eBay. I had a funny feeling that this switch might be faulty, so what I did was I basically just touched, now let me think, which is it? Trying to think, what is it you touch to where? There's something, it's one side. You touch one side to something or other. I'm trying to think what it is that you touch it to. I know there's a way. Ooh. Is it that? Oh yeah, it must be that. Yeah. Yeah, but that's not right, because that's the... Oh yeah, sorry, that is the indicator. Yeah, what am I talking about? That's the indicator relay there. See, there's so many different wires here now. I'm getting confused about what's what. Right, that's the indicator relay, okay? So the juice comes in this red wire from the main fuse, okay, into the relay. The relay is earthed through this green wire, which goes into the same bunch as all the other earth wires. So then what you do basically, if you touch this on here, you can see that basically the circuit works. It's a bit of a high flash rate, but basically it does what an indicator is supposed to do. It flashes. See, the rear one works as well. See if I can... Quite difficult to... There you go, see. So the indicators work. It's just basically this switch that's knackered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that switch off, and I've ordered a new switch, like a universal fit switch, off eBay, which is, I'm getting fast and free, so it should be here tomorrow or Wednesday. What I've done is I booked the bike in for its MOT on Thursday at 2 PM. So basically I've got about 2.5 days to get the bike completely finished and ready for its MOT. So you know, there's kind of pressure on, but there we go. I think I can do it. Let's see, the indicators on the other side. Where are we now? Oh yeah, there we go. Right, so what I'll do, this is kind of awkward. See, that side works as well, and it's quite difficult to do this and hold the camera. I think the back one, pretty sure the back one's working. I did test it. Yeah, there, it's working. Yeah, so you can see that the indicator relay works fine. The indicators work. Basically the whole thing works, everything except this switch. Strangely enough, actually, the horn does work. Well, it doesn't work now because it's not wired in at the moment, but it worked previously. So it's like some parts of the switch work and others don't, but it's not really any use to me if it doesn't work properly, you know. So just get rid of it and get a new one. Right, so that's the charging, starting, indicators, fan and fuel pump all pretty much done. Maybe little odds and ends to finish off, just to make and stuff like that. So the most difficult bit of the wiring was the ignition. This was the most complicated bit, basically wiring in the CDI. So you've got the compact digital ignition, right, which has got like about 9 wires. So what you've got essentially is you've got a main earth, you've got a couple of other earth circuits. Anything that's got green in it, generally speaking, is an earth, okay? So you've got one that goes to like clutch diode and clutch switch and that sort of stuff, and then ultimately goes to the earth. And then you've got another one that goes to the side stand switch. Now, some people might think I'm stupid for doing this, but I've just decided, you know what, keep it simple. We're just going to do away with these safety devices, and because I mean I've been riding bikes for years, and these days I never, you know, I put the side stand up without even thinking about it. You know, you just do it. Who does? You do know what I mean? So got rid of the side stand switch. So what I've done is I've basically wired the clutch switch and the side stand switch all into the same earth, and just basically made like a sort of trident shape of wires, 3 wires going into one, and earthed it, and that's it. That's that done. So that keeps it nice and simple. So then you've got the pulse generator down here. The pulse generator is a thing on the end of the crankshaft. Okay, it has a white wire. It actually says white, yellow in the Haynes, but in practice it seems to be just white. So it's a white wire and a yellow wire. So they're basically wired into the CDI. All I did was just basically crimped spade connectors on and just plugged them into the block connector, and then just ran the other end to the CDI, put them in there, just kind of cable tied them together a bit just to hold them in place, and put a lot of tape around. It's basically the same idea with everything. Everything's just kind of cable tied and taped in place. So what else have you got? Then you've got this wire here. This goes off to the rev counter. Okay, so the rev counter, which I think, if I remember correctly, my digital clocks do actually have a rev counter. Yeah, they do. Look, it says there 1000 RPM. So when I get the clocks wired up, I can actually wire the rev counter into the CDI, and hopefully it should work. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. It'll still pass the MOT without a rev counter. So that's not too much of a worry. Right, so what else have you got? So you've got the black and white wire. This is like the main thing from the CDI. So this connects into the starter switch, okay? So this was like an X shape wire that I had to do. So like these 2 wires. Basically what I do is if you've got a wire, you've got 3. What I do is I crimp one into a male and 2 into a female, put them together, and then what that does is that gives you a single wire that splits into 2. And if you need an X, what I do is I crimp 2 into a male and 2 into a female, and then plug the 2 together, and that gives you an X shape. So you can go like from 2 components to 2 other components or a switch, whatever. So this is what we've got here basically. So you've got that wire that goes into the CDI, got another one that goes off to the starter, and then this one here, although it doesn't look like in a diagram, it splits. Well, it splits there, strictly speaking, and goes to 2 different coils. Okay, and then we've got what else have we got? Oh yeah, so that's pretty much it, apart from the wires. I'm not sure which actually is the live and which is the neutral on the coils, to be honest, but I think as far as I can tell, I've wired it up properly. I put coloured terminals on the coils to coloured terminals here, and the black and white one I put onto the black terminals and the coils. So these 2 wires here, which should be blue yellow and yellow blue, but in my case they're like red and green. I can't remember which is which, but anyway, so they wire into the coil for plugs 1 to 4 and 2 to 3, and they also wire into the fuel cutoff relay, which I was talking about earlier, because the ignition, the CDI essentially is controlling the fuel cutoff relay. So the CDI effectively controls the fuel pump as well as controlling the coils based on the information that it gets from the pulse generator. Well, just that really. So that's pretty much it. That bit of the diagram there, that's just basically like the block connector for the CDI is like a special special kind of block connector. It's not the normal kind of block connectors you get in vehicles. It's got like funny little round kind of plugs, and it's difficult to describe, but I had to basically go to Maplin and get some of these. These are meant for a motherboard actually. They're basically little tiny kind of like square plugs, because the CDI has tiny little square pins which don't fit with normal kind of spade or bullet connectors. So what I did was I actually took my CDI to Maplin. For anyone who's watching from abroad, Maplin is like a shopping chain that does kind of electronics and stuff and electrical stuff in the UK. So I went and bought those, and as you can see I've used about half of them basically to wire all the wires into my CDI. So that's basically kind of what I've done there. So that's it kind of on a diagram. So in practice, what have you got? That's the actual CDI there, this black box here. What I've done is I've just cable tied it onto the chassis. It doesn't look too pretty. I'm going to need to cut this bit off. That's the end of the cable tie, so I'm going to snip that off just to tidy up a bit, but it's basically just cable tied, because the CDI is almost exactly the same width as the chassis, so I just cable tied it on there, and it's kind of quite solid. You know, it's not going anywhere. It's a massive cable tie that I've used. It's like about nearly an inch thick. So you can't really see what's plugged in where because I've taped all around it to kind of seal it, to keep the water out. Loads and loads just went round and round and round and round with the electrical tape. So basically there's a big bunch of wires come out of it there, come out of the CDI, and so you've got the two here. That's the pulse generator. See, the pulse generator is basically in there on the end of the crank, and you have this little wire that comes up from here. So you've got a yellow and a white inside it. It's got a block connector, and what I've done is I've plugged these two in and then just taped around them to make sure the block connector doesn't fall off and kind of thing. So then you've got the rest of the wires. You've got the two white, you've got the red and the green here to go into the fuel cut-off relay that I've talked about before, and then those two wires, they're spliced into, you can't really see in here because it just, you know, now that it's all done, it just looks like a big bunch of wires kind of thing. But basically you just have to take my word for it, these two are wired into these, which then go onto the coils. So you've got this coil here, is the coil that does the number 1 and then number 4 spark plugs. So that's the ones at the end, and then this coil here does the 2 middle spark plugs. Okay, so I've got the green wire going to this one. So basically you have 2 coils, each doing 2 spark plugs. I'm not quite sure why it doesn't need 4 coils. I think it must be something to do with like the ignition timing or something, that it can like fire 1 coil and that does 1 and 4 at the right time, and then fires the other coil and that fires 2 and 3 at the right. I don't know, but anyway, supposedly it works. So then we've got the black wires here, black wires which I think must be the earth. I'm assuming that's the earth. They both get spliced into the same one, so I've got another one of these kind of Y sort of shaped wiring jobs, and again that goes down at the CDI. And then you've also got the CDI earth, which is not wired in yet, but that's that there. So what I'm going to do is that earth there, which I've just poked the indicator wire into just to show you the indicator's working, that screw hole there is going to get an Allen bolt. I'm going to put a ring on it and put a bunch of spade connectors kind of coming out of it, like about 3 or 4 spade connectors, and then I can just plug all my everything and anything that needs an earth can just get plugged into the same earth, and that'll keep things nice and simple. And if I need to check an earth in the future, I know almost all the earths are at the front of the bike, just behind the headstock. So that's pretty much it. In terms of what I've done so far, when you look at it like that, it just looks like a few wires. It doesn't look like an awful lot of work. Trust me, it is a lot of work doing all of that. You've got to cut it, you've got to strip them, you've got to crimp the ends on, you've got to tape them, you've got to study diagrams. You know, it's a lot of work. But I've kind of done the bulk of it now, so what I've still got to do is, I've got a list here of what I've got to do. So what have I got to do? Done the starter, done the ignition, done the charging, done the radiator fan apart from the switch. Still got to do the headlights. Done the indicators. Still got to do the brake lights. Still got to do the horn. Done the fuel pump, more or less. Still got to do the speed sensor. Still got to do the fan switch. Still got to do the earth. And I've still got to replace the left switch gear when it comes in the post. So I've got about probably 2, 4, 6, about 7 things to do in about 2 days to do them. 2.5 days to do them. So I can probably get it done, I think, but I'm going to be busy. Let's be honest, I'm going to be busy. But as long as it works, I'll be happy. As long as I can get it running in time for the MOT, I don't care how hard I have to work over the next 2 days, I'll just do it. Because obviously I want the damn thing to run, you know. Anyway, this video is getting really long. I think this is probably about the longest video that I've made. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, the lights also work. I've tested the headlights and they also work. I've not wired them in yet. All I did was basically ran a couple of wires straight from the battery, just all the way down, and just I've put spade connectors on these and I just plugged them in and the headlights came on. So I know the headlights work, I know the indicators work, I know the horns work, the horn works, I know the starter button works, I know the starter motor works, I know the fuel pump works. Yeah, so it's kind of looking pretty good. Oh yeah, I know the rear light works as well. I'm not going to, yeah, nearly saw my registration there. Right, that's enough. Thanks for watching.